And we're taking a look at Scripture and God's prophetic word, and we're looking at world events, and we're trying to evaluate where we are and where we might possibly be and be going. And in Matthew and Mark, Luke, and John, we have 13 times the command to watch. Watch for these signs that are going to unpack and unfold in our time. We're told about in Matthew 24, verse 34, that the generation that views those signs will see them to completion. So as they start, that generation, and a generation, according to Psalms 90, is 70 to 80 years. When that generation starts to see these things unpack, they'll be the final generation. And a key event which we've been talking about is Daniel 9:27. We've looked at it pretty thoroughly, and I have that up now. Daniel 9:27 reads, "And he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week he'll put a stop to sacrifices and grain offering, and on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed is poured out on the one who makes desolate." So in particular, we're looking at, has this event taken place? Have we had the trigger event for the final 7 years? And that trigger event will be a covenant where he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. And we've been breaking that down, a lot of confusion about that passage, and we've been looking at some of the ways it likely could be interpreted. So here's a translation interpretation that is from some really solid Hebrew scholars, a number of them actually, who believe it can be interpreted, he will cause to strengthen or enforce a secular covenant with the Gentiles and the Jews for a period of 7 years. That puts a different look on this passage, rather than Antichrist and the Jews sitting down at a table and making a covenant. What we're talking about here is a covenant that launches the 70th week. And the covenant is with the many, and it will launch the 70th week. So let me pull that back down. And the many we've been working with, could this be the United Nations and the covenant that was made this year? So in September 22nd and 23rd, the UN ratified a covenant where they took sovereign power over, they could declare power during an emergency, and that power would be given to the United Nations. And this was a very overwhelming vote, which included even the United States and Israel, to basically shift global power at that point in time and give it to the United Nations. So that's a radical shift that the public is fairly unaware of. Even most prophecy people are fairly unaware of. And then what happened on October 2nd and 3rd is a smaller group led by Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, said they will force this covenant upon Israel to divide the land. And so as we look at he will make a firm covenant, the translation of what that should look like, cause to strengthen or enforce a secular covenant. So what we're working with is the strong possibility that the covenant that was drawn up by the United Nations, given them power, was then taken one step further on October 2nd, which is Tishri 1, which would launch the 70th week. And Tishri 1 is that key date, because according to Daniel 9, as we work through that passage, where we have 70 weeks decreed for the people, working on down through that passage, it's going to sum up all prophecy. And in verse 26, we have, after 62 weeks, Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. And I think most prophetic scholars look at that as the first coming of Christ when he came and was cut off. And there's a lot of discussion over exactly when did that happen. And personally, I lean towards the date of 30 AD, which is accepted by a lot of the scholarship. And part of the reason for my leaning that direction, well, there's a number of reasons, but I'm just going to be really brief. In Hosea, which I'll pull up here, in Hosea chapter 5, verse 15, I will go away and return to my place until they acknowledge their guilt and seek my face. In their affliction, they will earnestly seek me. And then continuing into chapter 6, come, let us return to the Lord, for he has torn us, but he will heal us. He has wounded us, but he will bandage us. He will revive us after 2 days. Now, a day, according to 2 Peter 3, can be 1,000 years. And so I look at that date of 30 AD, and using the typology, that would put us in the year 2030 for the reviving that he's talking about in Hosea chapter 6, verse 2. Now, given that, right now, of course, this is 2024, we just turned into 2025, but in 2024, on October 2nd, we had that treaty, which I believe will launch the 70th, or already launched the 70th week. So that would put the return of Christ in the year 2030 from a pre-wrath point of view. That would be when he will come and rapture his church. And then in 2031, we would have that final year of wrath in that 7 years, where we would have trumpets and bowls, and then we would have Revelation 19 unpacked, and we would have the final return of Christ where he comes to completely restore his kingdom and assign Antichrist and the false prophet to the lake of fire. So with that typology, I do believe God has given us those kinds of types as helps to understand where we are, little markers. So he gave us the final 7 years of Daniel's 70 weeks, 69 weeks, and then Messiah's cut off 1 more week of 7 years, and that will fulfill that prophecy. So the question from Daniel 9:27 is, have we entered that week? One other piece of typology which I lean strongly towards is the typology of just in 6 days God created, and on the 7th day he rested. I look at the strong possibility that we are looking at a 7,000 year earth history. So we are coming to the end of the 6,000 years and the return of Christ. And then we'll enter the millennium, which will be another 1,000 years and a time of 1,000 years of rest. That typology pushes me to be very watchful for what is happening currently, basically on the historical horizon. Where are we now? Where are we going? Where are we on the prophetic horizon? So I believe there's that strong possibility, and now we're commanded to watch and see how these things play out. So if what I'm saying is correct, if I have it, and I do not claim to be inerrant, I know there's going to be a lot of adjusting, and even myself, I didn't expect Daniel 9:27 to be fulfilled exactly like it has been fulfilled. But as Daniel chapter 12 says, Daniel was told to seal it up, and in the end it would be unsealed. So I believe we're sort of in that process of things being unsealed and clarified in front of us. And that's going to be what today is all about. We're watching to see if Daniel 9:27 has been fulfilled. So as we look at the Middle East and we look at Israel right now, there's been amazing shifts in power that have been happening that are very, very intriguing and things to watch for. So as we all know, in October 7th, 2023, we had the Hamas invasion of Israel. And that just set in motion a series of dominoes that has led us today to a place where Israel has completely decimated Hamas. So on the southern part of the Israeli territory, basically, the Gaza area, Hamas, which has been a plague has been very decimated. And then we had really the decimation of Hezbollah in the north. To everybody's surprise, including my own, Israel amazingly, and I believe with divine help, took out that major enemy to the north. They're still in that process with Hezbollah and Hamas of sort of final mopping up. But it has shifted the chessboard dramatically. And the players are being moved around that chessboard. And with the October 2nd, strong possibility that we've entered that covenant period of a final 7 years, I watch very closely developments in the Middle East. So as we watch things unpack, I get very, very intrigued to see, well, how will God move things around? In Daniel 9:27, pulling that back up again, in Daniel 9:27, I think most biblical scholars believe that the he here is the Antichrist. But what we see here, which is surprising to me, is that he's going to strengthen this covenant. He does not make the covenant, he strengthens that covenant. And that means, according to a lot of biblical scholars, including pre-trib biblical scholars, that this he here can be behind the scenes. He's not up front at the bargaining table necessarily doing this. It can be very, very covert. And according to Daniel 8, the way I read Daniel 8 is that the Antichrist is going to come out of the Seleucid Empire to the north. And so we'll have that conflict between the ram and the goat being basically the Seleucid Empire or Turkey, and that Antichrist himself will come out. He'll be the small horn which comes out of the Seleucid Empire. And so that would mean with the Seleucid Empire and with Antiochus Epiphanes as a type of the Antichrist around 175, what we would have then is help in deciphering where will the Antichrist come from. And Micah 5 says the Antichrist is called the Assyrian. And so that's a pretty big clue. So he comes out of the Seleucid Empire to the north, and he's called the Assyrian. The Assyrian Empire to the north then locates us geographically where to look for the coming Antichrist. So as I look for things to unpack in the Middle East, and we look for an Antichrist figure to emerge, I don't look for it to be super obvious at all. In fact, we may not know who the Antichrist is until the midpoint. According to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, he'll be revealed. The Antichrist will be revealed at that midpoint. It says in verse 3, "Let no one in any way deceive you, for it," that is the great apostasy and the coming of the Antichrist, "will not come unless the apostasy comes first and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction." So this may be fairly subtle. In Matthew 24, verse 15, as we see the unpacking of the signs, Jesus was asked, "What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the days?" Let me get rid of some of that color so it's not too distracting. But in Matthew 24, verse 15, Sachs says, "Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of through Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, when you see this event," which will be a midpoint event, "then they're told in Judea to flee." There's a very practical kind of an outworking of ministry that is going to need to take place at that point in time. So we are looking for this person who fulfills Daniel 9:27, but it may very well be very covert, not overt. And that's what I want to get into today, is some developments in the Middle East. And we talked last time about al-Jilani and his rise to power. He's pretty much maneuvering in Syria with a power vacuum, with Hezbollah and Russia pulling out and being removed, with Iran being very decimated both there and to the south with Hamas. And everybody right now is looking for the strong possibility that Iran is going to get hit by nukes, or take their nukes out, not get hit by nukes, but that Israel will likely take their nukes out. So as we watch for that power shift that's taken place points us to northern Syria and Jilani in fulfillment of Daniel 8. If we've entered into that final week, we should see some maneuverings that begin to point in those kinds of directions. So that's what we're kind of working with right now. And I'm going back to Daniel 9:27. And again, just to emphasize, we're watching. We're not 100% sure that we've kicked in. There will be confirmation developing, and we will watch for that confirmation. The confirmation will be the building of a temple and the dividing of the land. We've seen how the UN, in fact, about a month ago, the UN voted 157, I think, to about 6, that in June of 2025, that is their target date to force Israel to divide the land. So we'll be watching for that. And what would follow then is a temple. Now, if this is correct, we have to really get our bearings on where we are in history and time and where it's moving and where the seals would point. So in Revelation chapter 6, with these kind of indicators going on, we'd be looking at the first seal. The Lamb breaks the first of the 7 seals, and we have the white horse. And this would point us to the covenant made in the United Nations. And then that second seal is the red horse, which would indicate global war. And Matthew 24 parallels Revelation chapter 6. So that would put us in global war. So that would mean right now we're in a time frame of entering that final week, the first of the 7 years with the covenant. And that happened on October 2nd. So using the Jewish calendar, the next Tishri 1, using that calendar, and the book of Jubilees helps us see how that was handled. Using that calendar, we would be, after June, we would be just a few months away from the second seal breaking. And that would mean global war. So if we're correct, and we are watching right now, it's really time to prepare your heart and to help others get ready for what might possibly be unpacking upon the earth, that we would right now be about 9 months away, because the next Tishri 1 is September 15th. We'd be about 9 months away from that event taking place. And at that point in time, according to Matthew 24 and Revelation chapter 6, we enter into a real time of severe testing at that point in time. So we have the opening seal corresponding to verses 4 and 5. See to it that no one misleads you. Many will come in my name. So there's this hope of false peace that would unfold upon the earth. A covenant is made, great excitement, anticipation. But then the second seal, the rider on the red horse rides, and we hear of wars and rumors of wars. And we can hear of those things unpacking right before us right now. And then he says, see that you are not frightened, for those things must take place. Then he talks about nation rising against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and that the world becomes a really hot mess, to say the least. So if that's about 9 months away, it really truly is time to continue to watch for confirmation of that event. Watch for things to unpack. Watch for a temple. Watch for a dividing of the land, possibly in June. A temple going up, sacrifices happening. That would truly confirm that we are in the 70th week.